So, if you're building a business on AI right now, there's got to be one question just nagging at you. Where is it actually safe to build? I mean, what happens when the next big model from OpenAI or Anthropic drops? Could it just, poof, wipe out everything you've worked for? Finding the answer to that is the key to building something that actually lasts. So, let's get into it.
Yeah, this is the question, right? It's what's keeping founders and builders up at night. You're out there, you're building something amazing, but you've got this nagging feeling that the very ground beneath your feet could just shift without any warning at all.
And this right here, this is the central fear. It's the big one. You could pour your heart and soul into building a business, and then, one morning, the big model makers release an update that doesn't just compete with you, it makes your entire product totally worthless, overnight.
So what's at the core of this problem? Well, you could call it the AI middleware trap. And it's what happens when your company is, essentially just a pretty UI, a thin, user-friendly wrapper slapped on top of somebody else's intelligence. Your entire moat is only as deep as your user interface, and that's not very deep.
And believe me, the stakes are incredibly high. Just look at a company like Lovable. They're in this huge race to turn your simple prompts into fully deployed applications, and they've raised hundreds of millions of dollars at get this, a $6.6 billion valuation, and they're seeing over 100,000 new projects created on their platform every single day.
Okay, but this is where you start to see this huge gap between the sales pitch and the actual reality. The promise sounds revolutionary, right? We will build your entire business for you with AI. But then you peek under the hood, and what do you find? Often it's just another thin UI layer. There's very little real differentiation, and it's all running on the exact same base models from OpenAI or Anthropic or Google that literally everyone else is using.
So, okay, if being a thin wrapper is a trap, then how do you build a real defensible moat? Well, to get to the answer, we have to look past all the hype and past the conventional wisdom. The common advice you'll hear everywhere is, oh, you just got to train your own model, build your own intelligence. But it turns out that's not actually what separates the survivors from the companies that get wiped out.
No, the companies that are actually set to survive this whole disruption, they share a totally different trait. They own something structural, something foundational to how the web itself works, that the model providers just can't replicate with a fancier algorithm.
I mean, look at these examples. Replit? They're not trying to outtrain Anthropic on AI models. No way. They survive because they own the runtime, the place where your code actually executes. And for Cell, they own the deployment infrastructure that hosts apps for giants like Nike and even OpenAI itself. And then there's Notion. Their bet isn't on some proprietary model. It's on the 100 million users who have built this massive, massive knowledge graph of context. That's something every model desperately needs.
So all of this, it leads to a much, much bigger strategic question. The pattern is becoming pretty clear. AI makes production cheap. It commoditizes the act of building things, making it almost free. So if that's true, what in the world is actually worth building a company around anymore?
Well, the answer to that question can be found in this really powerful framework. The idea is that the future of the web is going to organize itself around 5 durable verticals of value. These are layers that AI structurally just can't provide on its own.
And here they are. Now, these aren't product categories, okay? They're fundamental layers of value. We've got trust, context, distribution, taste, and liability. Let's really break down what each of these means.
All right, let's start with the first 3 big ones. These are kind of the foundational layers: trust, context, and distribution.
First up is trust. Think about it. We're heading toward a world where millions of AI-generated apps are created every single day. A lot of them are going to look identical, and you can bet some will be actively malicious. So, how do you know an app won't steal your credit card, or that an online service is even real? The companies that become this verification layer are going to capture immense value. It's why seeing that Powered by Stripe logo isn't just a feature, it's a powerful trust signal that makes you kind of breathe a sigh of relief.
Okay, so once you trust a service, the next question is, how useful is it, really? And that brings us to context. See, an AI model by itself is just a generic tool, but give that same agent access to your company's private data, your meeting notes, your customer relationships, and suddenly it transforms. It goes from being a generic chatbot to being like a dependable junior employee that actually knows your business. The companies that own this specific context, like a Notion or a Salesforce, they own a critical choke point for creating value.
And number 3, we have distribution. So you can generate an app in seconds. Great. But who's going to see it? When the supply of digital products becomes basically infinite, curation becomes the scarcest and most valuable resource of all. All of a sudden, just getting discovered is the entire game. And this is why gatekeepers like Apple's App Store or Google search results, they only get stronger in the age of AI, not weaker. They own the map in a world with infinite destinations.
All right, let's move on to the final 2 verticals. And these are the ones that are uniquely human: taste and liability.
So what exactly is taste? I think the best analogy actually comes from music. Back in the day, what separated musicians was having expensive studio gear. But once production tools got cheap for everyone, that differentiator vanished. Suddenly, it was all about the producer's ear, their judgment, their unique point of view. Well, the exact same thing is happening right now. When anyone can build an app, your personal conviction about what should exist in the world, the little details, the design choices, the soul of the product, that becomes the entire game.
And finally, we have liability. Okay, this is probably the least sexy one, but it can be an incredibly powerful mode. Think about it. When an AI gives you terrible financial advice or writes a legal contract that's totally flawed, who's on the hook? The AI did it is not going to hold up in court. The professionals and platforms in regulated industries, we're talking law, finance, medicine, they build their entire business on selling accountability. They are the human backstop, and that is a service an AI simply can't provide.
Okay, so what does the new web actually look like when you put all these different layers together?
It kind of looks like this layered stack. Right at the very core, you've got the model providers, the ones creating the raw intelligence. Wrapped around them, you have the infrastructure players who are providing trust, and the context owners like Notion. Then on top of that, you have the distribution gatekeepers who control access. And finally, you have those essential, irreplaceable human layers of taste and liability.
So the big takeaway here is that companies like Vercel, Stripe, and Shopify, the ones providing that crucial trust and infrastructure layer, they are the true picks and shovels of this AI gold rush. The more stuff that gets built, the more essential and more durable their position becomes. And what's really fascinating about all this is that none of these concepts are actually new. Trust, context, distribution, taste, liability, these things have always mattered on the web. AI isn't changing the fundamental rules of the game. It's more like a forcing function that's radically amplifying their importance, making them matter more than they ever have before.
And that leaves us with one final crucial question you really need to ask yourself, whether you're running a whole business or just building a side project. What do you own that still matters if AI gets 10 times better tomorrow? Because if a better model makes your product worthless, it's time to rethink your entire position. But if a better model makes what you do more valuable, then you know you're building on solid ground.